This will be a brief one. Greetings. This is Danny Haifong. This is a thank you video to all of my patrons, subscribers on Substack, on Patreon, those who have decided that my work, my independent media work, is worth supporting, and that my commitments to anti-imperialism, to socialism, and to a struggle for a world free from exploitation, white supremacy, of the ravages of global capitalism, that work is worth supporting, that my commitments to socialism align with your principles. That to me is a beautiful thing. And the fact that this community is growing, the fact that there is seemingly a growing level of consciousness around the need for an alternative to this system in decline, this empire in decline. There's nothing more beautiful than that. And the fact that there is really a thirst for knowledge of situations and countries like actually existing socialism in Cuba, DPRK, and China, which I tend to focus on a lot, to me is a beautiful thing. So thank you for providing me this opportunity. Thank you for supporting me, all of you, all of those who've given any amount, all of those who are unable to give an amount but want to. Really, this is about the people. And I, for one, am never going to change my ideological or political commitments, my principles, based upon money, based upon whatever is trendy. These are really hard times. This is a moment of crisis. And we've seen how confusion has been sown even within so many of our friends. We see that COVID-19 has generated a crisis of legitimacy, as well as a crisis of confidence, as well as a crisis of consciousness. We have so much misinformation, so much misprioritization, and the U.S. ruling class, the imperialists, they are taking advantage of that. And I cannot be more humbled by the fact that there are so many who support my unapologetic work to foster peace with China, to foster solidarity with China, to expose the contradictions of U.S. imperialism, to remind people that white supremacy remains a key vehicle of this imperialist system to achieve what it really wants, which is unrepentant, unvarnished, unrestrained capitalist exploitation and war, to sow the divisions necessary, both material and ideological, which keep this completely and utterly disastrous system in place, and which keeps the crises from ever reversing, from ever being exposed to the point where there is a popular challenge to them. This is a moment of retreat for so many of us. We've learned this. We've learned how difficult the neoliberal moment of history is. And so I want to thank all of you for joining me, for joining this community, and for listening to my struggle and my participation in it. I grew up in a working class family. I grew up in a period where conditions worsened, even for those like my father, who was in a relatively decent union, who was a public sector worker. He carried cargo for 30 plus years for this international imperialist economy at an airport. And he broke so much of himself doing that, working long hours just to try to maintain some semblance of a standard of living as wages stagnated and as debt became an increasing reality for anybody who wanted the so-called American way of life. And my mother, someone who didn't work so much, she wasn't really able to. And when she did, it was very low wages. And a lot of that had to do with racism. A lot of that had to do with the ways in which she experienced this world, and she continues to experience this world. So growing up in that, and growing up in a society completely and utterly steeped in racism and capitalist exploitation, drove me eventually to realize that I needed to be part of this struggle. I needed to engage in the working class struggle. That's why I've always sought out unions wherever I worked. That's why I've always tried to be a shop steward multiple times in my life, because I knew that I needed to be in the fight no matter where I was. And then I picked up the pen or so to speak, the keyboard. And I began to contribute to Black Agenda Report. I began to contribute my ideological and political leanings, and to develop, as I started to study Marxism, as I started to study imperialism, as I started to study theory, I decided it was time to provide that analysis that we all need in order to strengthen the ideological coherence of our movements here in the belly of the beast, so we can remember the legacies of the Black Panther Party, of the Communist Party, and all of the revolutionary forefathers, mothers, and people before us, right? To remember what they achieved, what their limitations were, to remember that the global struggle against imperialism is directly linked to the struggle right here in the United States. To remember that the guns pointed, the prisons built toward Black people, toward indigenous people, that continue to suppress the self-determination of oppressed nations right here in the United States is directly related, more so now than ever, to the global imperialist war machine. And that we need to be curious about alternative systems. People like the 20+% of people in the world who live in China who are charting socialism with Chinese characteristics. We need to be curious about that. We need to understand it. We need to build bonds of friendship. We need to build bonds of solidarity. We cannot be isolated in this struggle. We need to remember Vladimir Lenin's concept of internationalism, of the national question. We need to develop the skills, the discipline, the organization that professional revolutionaries are duty-bound to participate in and to engage in. That's what my independent media work is all about. I'm not here to be a journo. I'm not here to merely investigate. All of my work is to forward the movement, is to develop the movement, is to ensure that the movement isn't trapped in the Democratic Party, that we're not trying to just reform and tinker around a rotten imperialist, racist, and capitalist system that has nothing left for us at this point. And you have all made that possible. And that is a beautiful thing, that during this moment of crisis, I was able to make this leap and to do something I've always wanted to do for the last 8 years, which is I want my writing to speak for itself and to contribute to the movement and to give myself time for all of my media work to be seen and to figure out ways where I can get this work seen so that it can really make an impact on the contradictions that we face today. And we face so many, from COVID, from imperialism abroad, mass incarceration, police brutality, the economic deterioration of the working class, all of these contradictions, white supremacy. We're facing them. We're in kind of this morass of contradictions because this system is in decline. It's in decay. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to feel confident that even though decay has meant retreat in many ways, and we see how ideologically this has come about with kind of the unraveling of political consciousness around COVID, the referendums, it seems like, on even something as ideologically still yet to be defined, like the Black Lives Matter movement, the response to that, the way that that has been repressed in so many ways, and how co-optation is such a hugely impactful thing, whether it is with the Black Rebellion, the Black Lives Matter movement of 2020, 2014, the Democratic Party trying to kill all of our movements and send them into the graveyard of social movements. Still, the people in the masses are moving to the left. They're moving. They're curious about socialism. So thank you all for letting me be part of this process and giving me more time to do that. Thanks to all my patrons. Thanks to all my subscribers on Substack. Thanks to all my followers everywhere, wherever you are. I look forward to another year of developing the commitment to this struggle and to building those bonds of solidarity and sharing them with all of you so you can engage in it too. That's what this media work is all about. So I appreciate it. Red salute. And we will win. Communism will win. Socialism will win. The future is now, and the United States is history. Thank you so much. And again, happy 2022. in this struggle.